Welcome, everyone. I'm Stephen W. Long, and this is The Writing Life. I have possibly said this before, but it bears saying again. We have the highest quality guest, and maybe it's the area, but I'm so pleased today to welcome Fonda Lee. And when we get started here, I want to read a few of your accolades. I can't do them all because we'll run out of time, but you have been so successful. So let me do a little bit here. All right. So Fonda, you are the author of Jade City, the first book in the Greenbone saga. It says that you were nominated for the Nebula Award, the Locust Award, named Best Book of 2017 by NPR, no small thing, Barnes & Noble, Sci-Fi Wire, and others. Your young adult science fiction novels Zeroboxer, Exo, and Crossfire have garnered numerous accolades, including being named Junior Library Guide Selection, the Andre Norton Award finalist, and the Oregon Award finalist, Oregon Spirit Award winner, and I don't know what YALSA is?
Oh, the Young Adult Library Services Association.
And we could go on and on. You've probably been asked this all the time, so I'll get it out. We'll get past this. You're also a black belt in Kung Fu and Karate. Yes. Okay. So, which impresses the heck out of me. So that's terrific. And I've been reading a little bit about you, and this is not typically the area that I would read in. So I'm going to ask you some things about that. One is, I think you said that you write speculative fiction, not science fiction.
I write science fiction and fantasy, which falls under kind of a broader category of fiction called speculative fiction, which also includes oftentimes horror or magic realism and so on.
Okay. Thanks for clearing that up for me, because I didn't know. This is something I'm also interested in. Your Zeroboxer, as an example, you said falls in between YA and adult. And then you described YA as primarily voice and to be seen, and this is my characterization, through the eyes, let me rephrase it, with a teenager in mind as the reader.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that. When you say, I think I know what you mean by voice, but fill me in.
Right. So I write both young adult fiction and adult fiction.
Okay.
And young adult fiction tends to be stories that are geared towards a teenage reader. That's not to say that adult readers don't gravitate toward it. We know a lot of adult readers enjoy young adult fiction as well. But the defining characteristic to me of a young adult novel is that it comes at the story from the perspective of a young person.
Okay.
And that is the lens through which we're viewing the world, is through the eyes of this young protagonist.
Now, and I hadn't thought about this before, just as you said that, I was thinking, that's not the only thing. And what I thought of was To Kill a Mockingbird. And there's probably a million. But that's one, seen through the eyes of a young person, but that's not young adult.
No, I mean, I would say young adult as a category is relatively new in construction. In that it didn't really exist when I was a young adult. There were books that now might be considered young adult that existed. S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders would be a great example of that. But there wasn't a specific category in the bookstore that was young adult.
A marketing
There wasn't a marketing category.
Gotcha.
And that existence of a marketing category has been it really came about after Harry Potter. And the phenomena that it created. There are books that really were published with an adult reader in mind that still are told through the eyes of a younger person.
Sure.
As opposed to, I think, the young adult novel, the modern construction of it is usually a young adult main character who
thank you.
And who is really, really To Kill a Mockingbird, the main character is Atticus Finch.
Right.
And even though we're viewing it one step removed.
Scout is the narrator, but the protagonist is Atticus. Okay. There's lots of let me say, at one time I heard being a writer is a license to snoop. Okay. And I think by that they mean things you encounter, overhear, observe, research. That's all fodder. You've had kind of an interesting experience that a lot of people don't have, and that's with Nike. Mm-hmm. So, having said that, let me back up a little bit. And it was Zeroboxer.
Yes, it was my first book.
Zeroboxer.
Yeah.
And I think I read that you incorporated some of that experience.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when I was young, I heard a piece of writing advice, which I didn't understand at the time, which is write what you know.
Right.
And it didn't make sense to me at the time because I was a teenager and I thought, I don't know anything.
Exactly.
So how can I write it?
Yeah.
And I'd always loved science fiction and fantasy, so I didn't want to write about being a teenager growing up in Canada and going to high school.
Okay.
I wanted to write about dragons and wizards and spaceships. So I didn't understand what that meant. And it was only later I always wanted to be a writer, but I figured that was not a viable career for ordinary people. I sort of imagined that writing was something that was, I don't even know what I imagined. Other people did that. It was sort of a magic job.
Sure.
And so I went and did a degree in business and did an MBA, ended up working at Nike in corporate strategy. But writing was always my passion, it was always a hobby, and I just did it for myself. And I got to a point where I wasn't writing anymore because I was so busy with working at the day job and raising children and living my life that I realized that I was lacking it in my life. And once I realized that I was lacking it, then I knew that that was really the thing that was that I had to have. And I came back to it. So when I went back to writing, I started to see things around me that would spur story ideas.
Okay.
And I realized that the write what you know isn't write literally what you know from your day-to-day life, but it's all of your experiences, your emotions, your attitudes, your interests, your passions, people that you have encountered, places you've been, situations that have stuck with you. And that really filtered into my debut novel, and it was not the first manuscript that I had written. I'd written other things.
You said you wrote a practice novel.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And I'd written, other things that were just sort of for myself. And the novel, at the time that I wrote Zeroboxer, I had another novel that I was trying to get published that went out to a few agents and started to get a little bit of interest, but didn't really go very far. And Zeroboxer, I think, became my debut because in many ways it was this book that only I could write. It had this combination of my love of science fiction and the background that I had in sports marketing and my background in martial arts. So it was this blend of things that really were interesting and unique to me, and I think that shows through as something that I think all writers need to find for themselves, is what is that combination of things from your life, your interests, or your experiences that turns into something unique that only you can write. So that was my debut, and from then on I couldn't stop. So here I am, and I'm working on my fifth book will be out next summer.
Okay, well I want to get there, but talking about write what you know, I have to think of Ursula Le Guin. I was at a Terroir creative writing festival presentation, and she said when kids come back from the summer, the teachers make a mistake in saying, "What did you do on your summer vacation?" What they should ask is, "What didn't you do on your summer vacation?" "Well, I didn't go to Mars." Well, write about that. And so this leads me to ask you something else, because what I write is very real and grounded and so on. Do you think it's easier or freeing, maybe not easier, but freeing to write about, to create the whole world building, as you say, or is it difficult?
It's both.
Okay.
I think that speculative fiction writers face a different set of challenges than realistic fiction writers. I think that world building is something that you gravitate towards if you really want to stretch your imaginative muscles.
Right.
And in particular, I think that it's a way to examine a lot of things in our own world, but from a different lens. Because if you're writing about our own world, you have the baggage of our own world. History happened a certain way. People, places are a certain place, and you're not going to completely change reality if you're writing about this world, but you can do that with speculative fiction. Right. So I can write about issues that I see going on in our own world. I can write about colonialism, sports marketing, race relations. I can handle big subjects, but I can put them in a completely different context.
So then for the reader, it's a little bit less threatening, maybe?
In a way, it's less threatening, but it's also more true, in a sense, and more pure, in that you're not now talking about any specific thing in our world, but you're creating a different palette. You can generalize some of those issues and treat them almost as an outside observer. So it's one of the things that I love about the genre of science fiction. I was a huge Star Trek fan growing up, and still am.
And you talked about being on your dad's lap.
Yes.
And I held my daughter, so there we go.
Yeah, yeah. So I was bathed in the glow of Star Trek original series reruns since I was an infant.
Right.
And that clearly had some formative effect on the brain.
Sure.
But one of the things that I loved, still love, about Star Trek and about science fiction as a genre is here you have this ongoing story about a bunch of characters on a spaceship traveling through space, but all of the situations that they're encountering are so allegorical to our own world, and it tackled so many current day issues through that fun space adventure lens. But you could watch that and it would make you actually think about how
examine our
you would examine our own situation, and also have fun at the same time and stretch your imagination. So so that's one of the reasons why I love the genre, is that it's not just escapism, like some people who might poo-poo the genre might say that, oh, well, you know, it's fantasy, it's not real. It is real. It's very real. All the things that we put on, we as
the
speculative
relationships
fiction,
maybe are real.
Yes, the emotions, the issues, the whatever it is that you put on the page is real, even if it's in the context of a world with magic or spaceships.
One of the things in one of my mini classes that I've taken, if you create a world, then you have to be consistent in that world. And I think that's, so then, I just thought of this, then the world has to be real to you. You can't, water can't flow uphill on one page and sideways on the other page. Whatever the rules are for that world, they have to be consistent.
Yes, they have to be internally consistent. I have described myself as a world-building junkie.
Okay.
I love creating worlds. I have Zeroboxer is a different world than Exo and Crossfire, which is a different world from the Greenbone saga. So I have obviously an urge to create worlds, and I love that process of figuring out the rules of that world and what can and can't happen.
Yeah.
And in a sense, you have the ability to stretch your imagination, but you are also building your own sandbox. And once you have built the constraints of that sandbox, then you're free to play within it. But you can't mislead the reader. You can never tell the reader that the world works a certain way and then betray that trust. You're really trying to create a a relationship with the reader where they have complete confidence in you as the author, that you know how this works.
That's in any genre. But I think it would be, You have an extra layer in speculative fiction because, you know, we can go outside and know what the weather is, or look on a map and know what the relationship of one city to another. You have to make that up, and then you have to stick with it.
Right.
Yeah. I read a book, and again, this isn't my typical genre. I don't have anything against it. It's just not what I seem to pick up. But I think it was called Zero World.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it was fine. But I was a little disappointed in the world building, in that it wasn't that different. And I think it was just a way for the author to talk about sort of what he wanted to talk about without a lot of work. And by that I mean, if I remember right, in this other world, men tended to have longer hair and women shorter. Or there was some kind of a role reversal, but really, I mean, that's not a big deal. So,
right. So there's a whole spectrum in terms of how deep you can go with the world building.
Right.
And I think different readers look for different things. So, you know, you have the people who are really into epic fantasy as a subgenre, and they want to know all the details of the magic system and how the magic works and what the rules are for the magic. And, you know, on the other hand, you can have urban fantasy, which is pretty much our world.
Okay.
Only it might have werewolves in it. So you have, within just the genre of speculative fiction, you have a huge variety of subgenres and how speculative it goes.
Okay. Let me back up just a second with something you said, epic fantasy. And it strikes me that I think I observed that in that genre, my goodness, the books are big. They are epic. And that seems to be unusual. I think, isn't that sort of confined to that genre? I mean, you're not going to find like a spy thriller, I don't think, that big.
I would say epic fantasy probably does top the upper end of word count in terms of, there aren't a lot of other genres and subgenres that get there.
Yeah, that much.
Yeah.
Fonda, I was reading about, in fact, it was an interview that you'd given, and you talked about taking an online writing course. And I know folks who have, you know, they go to all of the festivals and all of the meetings and this and that, and I know people who do the opposite, and with varying degrees of success. It seems unrelated in those particular cases. I wanted to ask you, the way that you said this, it sounds like it was helpful. It maybe gave you direction. I don't know.
So what it gave me was a regular writing practice.
Okay.
And I think for people who want to get into writing and who want to be writers, that's a really important thing to achieve.
And by that, I'm sorry, regularity.
Right.
So many words a day. I don't know what your thing is.
In the case, in my case, when I decided I wanted to be a serious writer, I took an online course where I had weekly assignments.
Okay.
So I knew that once a week I had to turn in an assignment of some sort. I had to do this much reading, assigned reading, and have comments on other people's work. So that instilled a certain regular discipline into the practice, which now I have my writing deadlines and commitments and so on that do that for me.
Right.
But when I was starting out, no one was asking for my work. No one was saying that I had a deadline by which I had to get things done. So, you know, as a writer, you have to find that for yourself. And people can do that a variety of different ways. Some people will say, I'm going to write this many words per day. Some people will say, I want to get a novel done this year. Whatever it is, I think having discipline and having goals is a really valuable thing to have as a writer.
So a couple of things there. Can I ask, when did you, and I know you started writing when you were really a child. When did you start writing professionally? And you seemed, I think I can use this word, you seemed prolific, and your first book, I think, didn't you say that you kind of start to finish, it was a year? Mm-hmm. Very fast, very fast. You must be very disciplined, or tell me,
try.
What do you think? Do you think that's accurate?
I think that's accurate. I started writing professionally in 2011.
Okay.
That's when I pegged myself as saying I want to be a published author. I want to do this as a career. I wrote.
And just prior to that, you were with Nike.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But you quit there and said, I'm going to be a writer, and that's what you did.
Right. I actually transitioned out of my day job in stages.
Okay.
So I cut back on my my work there, and then eventually I left, but I contracted back and was working there as a contractor. So I was working part-time. So I had to. Writing does not pay the bills for quite a while after you start until you have a number of books out and they're earning money. So I was juggling having my day job and also writing and having family and so on. But what I did was I had a goal to write a book a year. So I wrote a book in 2012 and I sent that out looking for some agents. And then Zeroboxer I wrote in 2013. So since then, I've stuck largely with this schedule of writing a book year. I broke that with Jade City because it was so big. And speaking of epic fantasy novels, this falls up there. So this series, the books are taking me more like a year and a half, 2 years. But I guess the way that I describe my ability to be prolific is I just think that it's my job.
It's your job.
It's not a option to me. It's to,
Right.
When I get it done, I have deadlines, and even when I don't have deadlines, I self-impose the deadline.
Sure.
So I set both long-term goals in terms of when do I want to have a book done, but also I need to get this draft done by a certain date, or I need to have this chapter revised this week, and I think that certainly helps.
There's the main goal with a hard deadline, and then I would think, like if you're building a house or whatever, because you're building a book, you back up from there and say, well then this is the step before that, and then this is the step before that, and it gets you going.
Yep.
Gets you going. So. Would you think that your books are character-driven? Are they plot-driven? Is it? What I'm trying to get at is when you do this, when you sit in the seat and do your work, is it? Do you start with character development? Is it? No, I'll fill that in later. Here's what I want to have happen, because you kind of talked about the allegory of I'm going to talk about racism or sports or whatever it is. Is that the kind of the driver for you, or is it the characters?
Each book is different.
Okay.
So I can't really answer that question because all those elements are so intertwined and they're so iterative. Each book starts as a seed, and that seed can be very different.
There you go.
So for Zeroboxer, it was the plot. I had an idea for what the story would be, the overall story. And I knew it would be basically the rise and fall of this athlete. And so I had an idea of the overall shape of the story before I had anything else. With EXO and Crossfire, which is the sequel to EXO, it was a character.
Okay.
I knew who the character was. And I knew what his main struggle would be, and everything else kind of built around that.
Okay.
And then with Jade City and the Greenbone Saga, it was the world. I have a line in my notebook. Actually, even more so than the world, it was the title. I had Jade City were those 2 words I wrote at the top of a page in my notebook, and I had this idea for what the world would be. I had no characters, I had no plot, but from that seed of an idea, it built out. So each story starts in a different place. It can be any one of those. It could be character, plot, world, and then you have to build it out from there. And it scaffolds, and everything drives the other elements. So once I start thinking about the characters, well then the nature of those characters is going to create some conflicts and some tension points that will drive the plot, or if it's the world that I'm building, I see what in that world would develop as natural conflicts, or what sort of characters would populate this world, and that goes back into the creative cycle. So it's like very much like I guess like building a house. You have to think about the whole
There's
thing.
a foundation.
Yeah, there's
and
a
then
foundation, and then you've got to think of it as a whole thing. You can't build one room and then try to
Right.
attach more rooms to it. You
Right.
have to have a vision of what the overall thing will look like.
Yeah. And again, my work is more character driven, and so that's where you start. But there's an aphorism that I've heard that the author needs to get their character up a tree and then throw rocks at them. In other words, you keep the pressure on.
Right.
You've got to do that. And in developing a character, I would think, particularly in your work, really the world is a character. I mean, that's that because it shapes everything.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's very true. Especially in this book, Jade City, the city I felt was very much a presence through the whole book, and that city's a fictional city. So, giving your books a sense of place is even more challenging in speculative fiction because it's not as if your reader has ever been to that place.
Sure.
If I want to describe Paris, I can do so with relatively few lines.
Right.
And the reader will know, oh yeah, I know, I've been to Paris, I know what that's like.
Or I've seen a postcard.
Or I've seen, right.
Something. They don't
Right.
have something.
But my readers have never been to these
Right.
places. And so I have to do that work for them.
Okay.
I don't have but I can do that by
But you
drawing
like
on what
doing
they
that too.
already know.
Yeah.
So I can
Right.
use cues in the narrative and the prose so that they get a sense for what this place is
Sure.
like.
Tell us quickly about your sequel.
So, the sequel to which? To Jade City?
Well, I know,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so I just turned in my manuscript, which is why I could finally find the time to be here.
Yeah.
I was racing towards a deadline. But I am tackling the challenge of writing a trilogy, an epic fantasy trilogy of all
Okay.
things. And
that would be book two?
That would be book two. So
Okay.
that book comes out next summer. And it is, it's funny, writing a sequel you would think would be easier because you've already established the world, you've established
Right.
the characters, so it should be easy.
All
Just
the work
continue
is
the
done.
story. But it is not. It is just as challenging as the first book,
Right.
if anything, because you've already got some story that's now printed, so you can't change it. And you have to give those characters new challenges, new journeys,
Right.
and build upon everything you've done before, but make it also fresh and interesting and new.
Right.
So it's a different challenge, one that is both frustrating and fun.
Yeah. I've heard authors say that, and these are established authors, as you are, but you're thinking, oh, you're an old hand, it's got to be easy by now. And they've said the same thing. Every book is a new thing. Every book is tough. And I think that's good. And I would, again, this just occurred to me. There are writers who, I don't want to name names, but we all have somebody in mind, who are their first books are great, they're very successful, and then as their career goes along, you're thinking, well, they phoned it in. This is rote now.
Right, right.
And I think when it's tough, it means you're working hard.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't like to make it easy for myself.
Right. Well, you want to be challenged.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I don't think I could, well, I hope I will never get to the point where it feels like making a chair.
Right.
Like I'm just
Here's
churning out-
another.
Here's another
Yeah.
one. I relish the fact that every book is a different thing, and it makes it fun and exciting to be starting a new project.
Right.
That's the burst of creative adrenaline that you get.
Right.
Is I've not tried this before. How's this going to go? I don't know. Another piece of similar wisdom that I've heard said is you never learn to write a book. You only learn to write that book.
Right.
Every time you start a new book, it's as if you're starting afresh. But you have gained the knowledge that you are capable of doing it.
There
And
you go.
that is,
And maybe there's
that
some
can carry you
confidence that
through.
comes with that,
Right.
some security. Well, Fonda Lee, thank you so much. You're
Thank
terrific.
you for having me on the show.
I just, I learn every time, and you've taught me a lot, so thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. And that's it, folks, this time. Come back and see us for the Writing Life next week, I guess we're going to do. And in the meantime, I'm Stephen W. Long. You can contact me through my website, stephenwlong.com. And I just appreciate you tuning in. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
What do you think? We done?
I don't know. You guys want to do one just
I
with
think
yourself
as
without
long
me
as
doing
they
the
think we're
bongos?
done, if
No,
they got
no,
enough. They got enough.
They got enough? Probably. Okay, sounds good.
Let's go to lunch. I'm
Oh.
hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could use a bite too.